The planned workshop will come to order. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. I hope everybody had a good holidays. And would you please stand, members of TIRA, for the pledge of the flag? The records reflect the members that are here. Councilman Tillman is not here at the moment, but is due. Members should have received minutes of November the 19th, 2024. That sure seems like a long ways back. Is there any corrections or additions to those minutes? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we accept the minutes from the previous meeting.
Second by Bill. Discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Thank you.
Chairman, Councilman Tillman is walking around the corner right now.
All right, thank you. He can catch up when he gets here. Moving forward, review the plans. So we want to start out by talking about the survey. Who would like to lead out on that? Craig? Emily?
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's
Good evening.
nice to see you all again. Hopefully you all had a good holiday.
You as well.
Yes.
So it's been, I guess, just about 2 months since we last met. So, and so you would have received quite a bit of information in this month's packet. And starting with the survey. So we did the compilation of the survey and then worked on getting the majority of the background data compiled and completed. So we'll jump in. I'm going to let Emily take over in presenting the information on the survey. But as usual, we'll keep it, as an open format, an open discussion, and try and make it as useful for everybody. Even in this, it's always tough in this format to have these kind of discussions, but we'll work through it.
Thank you.
Okay, so please let me know if at any point you want to stop and discuss one of the questions that we're going over. Just dive right in. So when we closed the survey, we ended up having 537 responses, which represented 1,689 Taneytown residents, or about 23.4% of the whole Taneytown population. 55% of respondents lived in zones 1 and 2. And if you don't have your map in front of you, zone 2 was to the east side of Taneytown. It's sort of southeast of Broad Street and north of East Baltimore Street. And then zone 3 is the area south of East Baltimore Street there. That's kind of the neighborhood around Northwest Middle School and Kenny's Market. And that does include Carroll Vista as well.
Yeah, so Emily, is it okay if we just have comments as you're moving along?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so when I read that, basically what it told me was we didn't get a lot of comments from what I'll call the old section of Taneytown. So most of that area is the newer developments. They've been developed since I was a kid. So I just think it's a interesting observation, and I guess I'm not sure if it skews the data, but it's certainly, it's only 55%. So, I mean, the rest, it's really kind of close, but just an observation I wanted to share.
Yeah, so we did have, for that downtown area, which was zone 1, there were about 15% of the responses were from that area. And for comparison, zone 3 was about 18%. But we did have a lot of that zone 1 area were potentially business owners, because there were a lot who also referenced zone 1 as well. So 49% of people who responded to the survey have lived in Taneytown for over 15 years. And then the next biggest group was 33 moved to the area within the last 5 years. And I have a couple more specific statistics on that later on to kind of get into that a little bit more. 82% of people think that the quality of life in Taneytown is good or better. And people are really united on some of the main issues. About 70% of people highlighted the intersection of 194 and 140 as an area that they felt was a problem in terms of traffic and safety. In general, throughout the open-ended questions, there were a lot of comments with strong support for the Greenway, and people kind of discussing areas around that intersection and what they felt could be done. The main reason why people said they chose to live in Taneytown were either to raise a family or because of proximity to family, as well as affordable housing. And then the common reasons why people said they would leave Taneytown were a rise in crime or a change in the character due to overdevelopment. And those two especially are themes that will kind of come out again over and over in the open-ended questions and in some of the other questions of the
Yep,
survey.
excuse me, Emily. So just so a couple comments there. So the main reasons people choose to live in Taneytown, you know, so we talk about affordable housing. I wish that could be related to, I don't know, income or something like that, because to me, what's affordable to one person might not be affordable to another. So I'm not really sure what that means or what that tells us. So that's one comment. And then the other section there where it says change in character due to overdevelopment. And again, I don't know if looking at the data will tell us, but to me, I'm trying to understand what do people think is the tipping point? So what is overdevelopment? You know, some people think we're already past that. Some people may not. So just some comments I just wanted to get out there for the team to think about, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I tend to agree that there's it's kind of open-ended as what is the level of affordability when they talk about affordable housing, and do they mean affordable housing in the way the state means affordable housing, and you know, which are very different things. But obviously, family and family ties are very important to the people who live here. But what I really found interesting was that the preponderance of people who live here either have been here for a large portion of their lives or just got here, and there's not a lot of people in the middle. And that gives us two very different viewpoints to reconcile as we move forward with what we're trying to accomplish. And and one other thing I just real quick I want to mention, because one of the cited reasons people would leave Taneytown is the rise in crime, and I find that interesting, and crime is spoken about in a couple other places and we can talk about it later, but, you know, this is a very low crime place to live. You know, from a statistical standpoint, the rate of crime here is very, very low. It may seem higher than it's been, it may seem high to people who are used to no crime, but you know, I've worked in some places and been in places where crime is an issue, and that's not here. So I don't know whether that's a perception thing that somehow the city needs to figure out a way to clear, or just better outreach. I don't know.
I guess a lot depends on where you live in Taneytown, because I know some areas you have police there a lot at your neighbors.
Yes. Yeah, I can speak to that directly across the street, and the number of times the ambulances pulled up either across the street or right next door to me. So but from a statistical standpoint, it is still
Right.
substantially lower than other places
Yes.
in the state and even in the county.
So is that crime related to the different developments, or the crime related to downtown areas?
I
Yeah. So that's exactly what I was going to comment on next. It was, you know, the last statement there, we talk about the more crime, especially juvenile. So I was wondering what area of town people actually saw that.
Well, one of the comments said at Carnival Drive out Fairground Avenue area out in through there, some of the comments in here said
Yeah.
the address.
That was specific on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I would tell you, just from, and, you know, from talking to Adrian and just knowing, you know, what goes on around town, you know, there are pockets. There is that pocket, that Carnival Drive pocket. There is the kind of, in those townhouses at Roth and Red Tulip, and that's kind of a pocket there. And of course, the downtown area. So yeah, you see some of that, especially some juvenile crime. That's where your drug crime is. Other than that, there's just some cultural juvenile delinquency kind of things that may happen out in the outer developments. But I think that the bulk of that is what we're talking about.
So one of the things that I'm, you know, with this conversation, the conclusions I'm trying to draw, and maybe we're not there yet, but is there a certain type of housing that causes more crime, or
I believe so.
maybe it's
If you look
related
at
to
A
it?
couple areas we just discussed, they are one type of house.
So that's, I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to,
Well,
And
the-
it's socioeconomically related. Go ahead, Jim, I'm sorry.
The other thing is it related to property-owned houses, people-owned houses, or rentals?
rentals.
Because I understand from some of the areas, like the new areas, that some of the private homes are being rented out, leased.
Yes, that is true.
So is that in any figure?
Want to hear the spin of the code enforcement officer?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
So when affordable housing is this, if you move from PG County or Montgomery County and you don't mind the commute, or there are dozens of people that I know right now that are hearing the fact that the president is saying that, you know, X amount of people are going to return back to work. I talked to a gal at the trick or treat thing. Councilman, I'm not sure if you, she was there for a while. She spoke to Jim and I about the fact that she came from PG County, and because of the prices of homes. So she's able to move here, get the custom home, get the new built home that she wanted. 2 young kids, fell in love with the school district. And she just said, it rung on my head Monday. She said, I just hope I don't have to go back to work. She's been telecommuting. So in any case, long story short, when people say affordable housing, they don't mean, you know, a townhouse or a condo or whatever, just affordable for what they know.
Less than what they
So
used
when
to.
they're coming here from PG, Montgomery, Anne Arundel County, they're buying a whole lot or as much of a house and putting money in the bank.
Like what Dan was saying, his comment earlier about affordable housing, that definition is what.
Right.
It's very broad when it comes, somehow we have to.
Yeah.
What's affordable depends on the number of zeros in your bank account.
Yeah,
So,
that's exactly right.
yeah, so yeah, that's a tough nut to crack there.
So Emily, I know you looked at the data a lot more than we did. If any of our conversations spurs an idea of how you can look at the data differently, I certainly would be interested in.
Or if you have a different take.
Yeah, exactly, yes. That'd be great, so.
Well, I will say that the instances where people mentioned crime as why they might leave Taneytown, it seemed to be pretty split between whether people were actually seeing or perceived to see an increase in crime, or where people just thought it as a general, this could happen and that's why I would leave. Not necessarily that it was happening.
Right.
In relation to the affordability comments, my understanding based on the comments did seem to be more in line with what Daryl was saying, where it's affordability in comparison to where they had been before. And it does seem to be a general sentiment that rentals specifically, or something like townhomes, were not necessarily desirable and were areas where either there was or there was perceived to be higher crime.
But when you put people closer together, it creates more friction.
Sure. I think it's really important with the affordable housing, the definitions that we just discussed makes perfect sense to me, but that's not what the state says.
No.
So it's, I think it's
Yes,
important for us
because,
to
right,
understand
and so when we, as a commission, talk about affordable housing in the way that the state talks about affordable housing, then we need to be very clear what we're talking about when we do that.
Agreed.
But yes, yeah, I would, people moving here for the affordability of housing relative to what they were used to, I can see that absolutely. So, but like I said, we need to be careful in the nomenclature we use sometimes in that regard.
All right, let's move on then.
Okay. Let's see. People overwhelmingly loved the parks and the library. That's something that stood out a lot over and over. Where people felt that there could be improvement, it kind of was split. It was interesting because there were a lot of people that said they wanted more programs or activities specifically for youth or adults, kind of that under 55 range. But then a lot of responses did indicate that residents loved the amount and types of programs that were organized, whether it was from the park system or the library or somewhere else. And a lot of these respondents felt that there were plenty of events, but maybe that the problem was they weren't necessarily visible enough, or people just weren't necessarily aware of the events that were available. And that was pretty kind of like 50-50 split, with enough or not enough programs throughout the city.
Sorry, we skipped the two big ones in here that I wanted to talk about.
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's go back.
Sorry to slow us down here. So on the, which is page 4 here, they talk about that people felt like they were ostracized by others due to their beliefs. And I actually kind of felt offended to that. I don't, unfortunately, fortunately or whatever, I don't really experience that. I wish there were more details on what they actually meant by the, and yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a racial or anything else there, but I guess I didn't really expect to see that, especially with the next statement there when everybody wants to talk about the small town feel, which I know Chris and I talked about, what does a small town really mean? I just kind of wish I would have had some more details as far as feeling ostracized. I mean, it could be 1,000 different things that would affect somebody not feeling comfortable. And as far as the, I don't know if anybody had any other comments on that subject or not there.
Not really.
But,
That's kind of a off-the-wall thing to me.
But as far as the community publication, I can tell you that I think that is really, really huge. And I can speak for for the volunteer fire company here. When we have an event, one of the hardest things we have to do is get the information out. So there's all kinds of ways to put information out. But if I put it on Facebook, some people don't see that. If I put it in a newspaper, some people don't see that. So, I mean, to me, one of the best ways to do it would be to have a publication that's written that's also duplicated online. So that, to me, that's one of the best things.
And I think you're going to find, moving forward at the council level, as we have a meeting coming up here on the 29th to talk specifically about the Main Street program and what's going to happen with that and where it's going to go. As part of that, how is that written communication going to be coming out? A lot of people say that they missed the Taneytown record. That was really kind of a pain in the butt thing for the city to put out. It just kind of fell by the wayside to other activities, given the personnel structure. But we'd like to move back to something like that, and then we're actually, I think, talking to Mike Hillman up at Emmitsburg about doing a Taneytown version of the paper. In the past, he's been reticent to do that because we have been doing the Taneytown record and offering free advertising to the downtown, to Taneytown businesses. He didn't want to be competing against free advertising. So I think that we're going to try in moving forward, since publishing a paper is what he does, not what we do, let's let him publish a paper and feed him information. And I think that's going to be the way forward. But that'll be something that, again, that'll be discussed at the Main Street meeting on the 29th.
Like Dan just said, there's a lot of people who like to see something in front of them.
Yes.
Hard copies.
And I'm one of those people.
Not everybody's into technology.
Same.
Oh, I forgot, Barry, yeah.
Right. Yeah, thank,
Good points.
yeah,
Good
thanks
points.
for letting me interrupt, thank you.
And I will say a lot of the responses did mention having a printed publication, whether it was how they got their news in the past and they really liked that, or they see it from surrounding municipalities or areas and it's something that they just really value. So that does support, I think, the idea of having that printed publication. And I did also want to just mention that we did have most of the comments where people said that they felt ostracized. They did include a reason most of the time. And this also was not a majority of responders, but it was a significant enough amount that we wanted to mention it. But where people said that they felt that way, some of the specifics were either social or political divides, or feeling unwelcome or like an outsider as a racial or ethnic minority or as a member of the LGBTQ community. There were maybe one or two comments with people saying they were in a neighborhood where they lived kind of a little further out from the center of Taneytown and they felt a little bit unwelcome being in one of those neighborhoods. Like I think Meath Crossing maybe was mentioned for feeling a little bit ostracized from the rest of town.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
And I don't think that Taneytown's unique in this situation, right? I think, we would see these same kind of comments in many communities just because of the polarization of things that we're currently, the environment we're currently in. So I think what you take from that, we just, strive to do what you're always doing right now with all of your community events and just keep that welcoming approach to things and to try to overcome that.
Yeah, I think the community events in particular, though, the big events we're doing at the park, I think are very, very clearly welcoming and I think very clearly being attended by all people from all walks of life. So I think we're doing what we can, but some of it is also in the current culture, so.
And some of that too could be the people who aren't aware of the events, whether it's because they're not seeing, they want a physical publication or they're just not checking the Taneytown website or social media or the app. So it could be people who feel ostracized because they're unaware of the events that are going on already. And that's something that, unfortunately, we don't have a little bit more data. They didn't, there was no
Needed a
response in that
concern.
way. Okay.
Yep, cool.
So, let me just find my spot again here. All right, so a pool was mentioned as a thing that people wanted a couple of times. But also people mentioned things like cultural or entertainment centers like theaters or bars or art studios. A lot of people mentioned that they loved the dance studio and they wanted something that was kind of more in that vein of entertainment. And I think that that also supports where some of the people about adult age said that there maybe wasn't enough for them to do in Taneytown. There's a lot of park events and family events and things, but they felt they wanted something a little bit more to do in terms of a business that they could patronize and things like that. A couple people also did mention something about wanting a Taneytown welcome sign. So that was just something that took out as
Yeah,
well.
it's actually something we talked about a couple of years ago about a new Welcome to Taneytown sign, and there was never any real consensus about moving forward on it, and so it just kind of died, but we can certainly bring that back up.
That's easy.
And again, that's something that may come out of the coming Main Street discussions, so.
Something we talked about way back with Sheets out
Yeah.
there. A welcome sign out there at the circle somewhere.
There used to be one down
Yes.
from the chamber.
Yeah, either Chamber or the Lions or both
Well, we had one there,
maintained it.
and we had one out by 20, coming in by 20.
Right, and a couple of them had to be taken down because of
Where?
because of construction, or the state made it take them down or whatever, or they felt were falling down. I know that the chamber has some of the signs, old signs, still in a storage unit. I'm not sure exactly where that stuff ended up right now, but I can look into that. But I did some research on that. About half of the communities in Carroll County have one of those signs, and about half don't. So,
That's supposed to make them feel warm and fuzzy, or what?
I don't know.
I'm just curious.
It'd be nice, I think. It'd be welcoming. Yeah.
Whatever. Okay.
But that's not something I want to spend a lot of money on.
No, but I think the sign be more beneficial to everyone coming from the east end of town than the west. Because more people would see stuff coming into town that direction than coming in from Emmitsburg. Coming in from Emmitsburg, that's the only place you see that sign. You miss it if you're coming in Harney Road. You miss it if you're coming in 194 either direction.
So we're just talking about a sign that says, "Welcome to Taneytown"?
That's the only sign we got.
Why don't
So-
you stand out
Well,
there
you
and
have,
hold
I mean, there is the message sign, the changing message sign at the park.
That would be valuable.
And something like that would be cool to have, except that we looked into that from the chamber standpoint, and the problem is permitting to do it, because whose property do you put it on, and does that fit into the current sign ordinances, and how, would you have to get a special exception? And it became a bit more of a chore than they were willing to take on at the time. But it would be nice to have a sign similar to what's in the park down near the circle somewhere. And maybe in some of the coming developments that are being discussed around the circle, maybe that's something we can get out of that.
I wouldn't want to burn a lot of calories on a sign that just says, "Welcome to Taneytown." That's just, except for Barry, everybody else looks at Google Maps before they
That's
leave their
true.
house.
That's true.
So they know where they're going.
That's true.
Anyway, just my opinion.
Wait till the blackout happens, see what happens.
All right, let's keep moving on.
Yep.
I did just want to call out a section of this quote from an open-ended question that we had that seemed like a sentiment a lot of people had. We want to spend our dollars locally, but because of lack of businesses / amenities in town, residents find themselves driving to other towns to spend their money. And that was something that we had over and over in a variety of different ways that people said, supporting downtown business, wanting to revitalize downtown, wanting to focus on Main Street, wanting to stay local. I think that's what a lot of people attribute to that small town feel. I know that's something we'd mentioned earlier, like what does that mean? And it seems like to a lot of people that means small businesses in downtown where they can go. They didn't seem to mind, people didn't mind going to other communities for a larger event or a facility that is something that was, a much bigger deal, or you spend a lot more of your time at. But for everyday shopping, weekend shopping, things like that, people seem to want everything in downtown.
So Emily, is this, are these words that came directly from the survey, or is this your summary?
Yes, no, the areas that are quoted and in italics, those are pulled directly from some of the open-ended questions.
Because the only note I had on the bottom of page 5 was, "This is huge." I mean, to me, because that's, in my opinion, that just tells exactly what we should be working for.
Well, and I agree, because I've been beating that particular drum at council and even before I've been on council, in terms of the actually using the Main Street designation and the Main Street program to move that kind of thing forward. I think that's a huge, it's huge to take this particular quote forward and to our meeting on the 29th with council to talk about, what exactly people are looking for, because this person here summed it up pretty well.
Yep. And just to clarify, Emily, so that, the way they stated there, in your opinion, did that cover most of the responses from the whole survey? You think a lot of
Yes.
people feel that way, right?
Yes, it seemed a lot of the people, whether they kind of went into more detail or not, a lot of the responses really were reflected in this quote, which is why we wanted to include it specifically, because it really, like you said, it summed up a lot of the things that people really seem to feel,
Cool. Very
especially
good.
in relation to that. So,
Cool. Thanks
Great, thank you.
thanks for restating that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the important thing with that is to, is through that Main Street program discussion that you're having is, it's really important to emphasize the importance of patronizing these businesses when they do establish themselves, right? Because it takes it takes the customers to keep them open. And, I don't know how you stress that enough, but that's, if they want the businesses, then you got to go support them.
Yeah, we're kind of in a bit of a chicken and egg thing here also, because there's a lot of people like, well, businesses aren't open. Well, there's not a lot of downtown customers. Well, there aren't downtown customers because businesses aren't open. So somebody has to break that cycle and lead forward. And so I think that's what the Main Street program is there to do. So hopefully, again, that's a horse I'm going to continue to whip all evening, I think.
Looking from another angle, being how I used to own a property downtown, it's a lot easier to convert it into apartments and you're guaranteed rent money instead of have businesses come and go all the time. So
That's
you
one of
gotta
the-
look at a business.
And that's one of the issues. I mean, there are a lot of storefronts that have been converted to apartments
Right.
for exactly that reason. A lot of that happened, from my understanding, because I wasn't here at the time, but the streetscape kind of forced that hand a little bit. And so until we have some successes in downtown, it's going to be hard to get those landowners, property owners to look to turn back.
You get a lot more rent money, Ken, from the people with the stores, because they don't have the cash put out like HUD or anybody else does.
Yes.
And any thoughts on how to change that?
From a business, from my standpoint, I don't think we need to. There's nothing wrong with having houses downtown.
That's what if
Housing, I mean, stores never worked out for me, or where a lawyer was, they come and go. Apartments always worked out better.
So I've always looked at downtown as just that. It's downtown. Is it predominantly business? Is it predominantly housing? Because both are needed, okay? So the challenge in today's economics is to take a 450 square foot space, sell something for a profit, okay? That's all you're living on. And you better be selling that to you and I multiple times a month. Because if you're not gonna last long. So it goes from another acumen with Bellisimo's and Cinco de Mayo. When they came in, when both owners came into my office and told me what they were doing, I could barely speak after the first sentence, because these are businesses that have done it before. Sure. They have multiple staff. They're not coming here thinking they're gonna work 90 hours a week and do that for 10 years, all right? Because it doesn't work that way. They have staff that are paying payroll, the other things that come with that. And they know there'll be good times and bad times and what to do to prepare for them. So I've always worried about the downtown thing, because, is that what is wanted? And Chris, or Councilman, I said a while back, I would love for a person to come in and look at downtown and see what are we doing right and what we're doing wrong, because I don't know that anybody on that, we hired somebody, my first council 20-some years ago. The guy, had to be a gentleman, he came in, went through the town and just tore through the thing. He just really looked at what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. So we have two businesses that could be restaurants. Why they're not open, and why anybody sitting in this room is surprised that's not helpful, it just blows me away. Because what you see a lot of here is bypass and dining restaurants.
and that's
Let's help ourselves.
yeah. And unfortunately, as a community, both from the city side and from the property owner side, is we have often worked against ourselves with what we've done and how we've done it. And frankly, that's what's got to change, and that's what's got to stop. So, how you do that, that's an awfully good question. But I think one of the things that, from my perspective, as one of those people that hasn't been in Taneytown very long, is that community doesn't seem to look outside of itself sometimes for much. There's more help out there than people realize, and I think that we need to make use of that and look at fresh approaches.
I mean, we are forgetting, there is one successful business downtown that has an eatery.
Yeah.
Downtown, Stonehouse.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the Stone House,
We
the
forget
Country
about
Kitchen
that.
is successful.
I frequent it. I'm curious of what the percentage is to their catering, to when I go in there, on the weekends mainly. There's people sitting in there, a lot of foot traffic in and out, picking stuff up. but they're not from here. A lot of them are coming in to pick up.
Well, that's the model, and they were talking, I'm gonna get off track here a little bit, but, back in October, there was a, Main Street Symposium, in Frederick, put on by the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. And one of the things that came clearly out of that is the kind of businesses that we should be looking for, are businesses that sell online as well as out of the brick and mortar store, more than just relying on more than just the foot traffic, and businesses that need to utilize that space for their makers, for making whatever it is that they're selling. And the Stone House is a perfect example of that.
And Joe has done a very good job over there.
Yeah.
He's got all the corporate all through town. And plus, from that is word of, think about those people that go in there to get something for corporate. Well, at the same time, they're not forgetting where it came from. So when they go home that night or whatever, hey, let's go there. That's pretty good food. Let's
See all those cupcakes lined
have
up.
that and the regular food.
Yeah.
You know, but he's done a very successful.
Yes.
You know, he took a chance. You
Yeah.
know, I just wish we had more.
And I think that there's opportunities like that out there. So but we're getting a
Yep.
little off track.
No,
Let's
no,
get back
that's-
onto the.
That's fine.
All right, Emily, where are we? You can put us back on track.
Get us on track.
Top of page 6.
Okay.
Got it.
So that overdevelopment in general, development was mentioned a lot throughout the survey. Whether people felt that Taneytown had already reached a point of overdevelopment or whether they were just concerned about there being more development than had currently happened. A lot of people mentioned things like development happening too quickly or feeling like it wasn't necessarily planned well in conjunction with the needs of the existing people in Taneytown or long-term residents. That was kind of split and mentioned multiple times throughout where people were talking about overdevelopment. And I think that people a lot of the times also mentioned development in relation to crime and again in relation to that small town feel. So those all seem to be connected in people's minds. We had a couple other quotes down here that were just kind of reiterating that idea, how people felt. And also that I think it's a key element that I kept seeing. People were really excited about the Greenway and really wanted it, but didn't seem to know anything about it in that they didn't understand why it wasn't happening, why there wasn't progress on it. There just didn't seem to be a lot of visibility within the responses that we got on where the project stands, and I think more importantly, why it's such a difficult project to complete, and why it has been several decades kind of in planning and in people's minds. So that was something that I think stood out as well to us. Let's see. As we kind of talked about, at least 60 of the open-ended responses indicated wanting more dining, specifically sit-down and family-style restaurants, and kind of mention more in tangent with small business rather than a larger restaurant on the outskirts of town. In general, there just was a desire for a variety of small businesses. And kind of in conjunction with that, traffic speed through the city was mentioned several times as an issue. In addition, of course, to talking about the Greenway, but just speed and congestion and safety, especially on that Main Street corridor, people felt was a major issue, which could be, affecting the small businesses in downtown. People don't feel safe or comfortable walking there necessarily, in some cases.
That's a truism, the heavy truck traffic. Although the speeds, which generally aren't as high as people think they are, but it's still, at night when there's no other traffic, it can be an issue when people go whizzing through town. And, I hear the boys in their souped up, chipped up turbo pickups go whining out of the intersection. And crosswalks would be good, and we are actually working with the State Highway Administration to improve the crosswalk situation. We've already made improvements to the light timing at the square. We're going to be getting the rapid flashing push-button beacon down here at Middle Street. We're looking into an additional crosswalk up in the vicinity of Church Street. So we are looking at additional crosswalk locations and additional pedestrian safety measures, but that's gonna be, all of those things have to work through State Highway Administration because Baltimore Street is a state road and the pace there is quite glacial, so.
I can understand what the people meant by development too fast, because just look what the planning commission did in the last year. They approved over 1,000 cars hitting Frederick Street. That's a lot of traffic in 1 year. I mean, say you had 300 from the park, when that hits Frederick Street, you have 250 cars from Vapco, that gets developed. First phase down here, the other development, that was 258 houses. That, at least 500 cars, 2 per house. And that's a lot of traffic just on Frederick Street that you added. I can understand where the people are coming from.
Well, but part of that, though, we have to, and people need to understand, there's a certain amount of that, because it is all, the properties are already currently zoned in that manner, and people come to us looking to do developments, in that, that fit within the zoning, we really can't stop that. We are obligated, if they have a plan that meets our needs and falls within the zoning, we can't tell them they can't do it just because we don't want it. So
Can slow down. The town could slow down a
we
little.
we can try to work some of that out. Yeah, and I don't disagree.
That's all part of when they annex too. When you annex
Yeah.
this property in, you're saying that we're gonna provide this. What was the traffic count on Tavanian Road that they mentioned the other night with the camera thing? Was
So,
it 1,000 or 3,000
There
people?
were about 3,000 vehicles per day that go up and down Trevanion Road.
Tavanian Road,
3,000?
Yes.
Tavanian Road.
And nearly 10% of those are speeding at a 12 mile per hour or more above the speed limit,
That, I can believe that.
which is why we're looking into cameras there.
Buses anymore, mothers have to take them to school.
And right, and there, of course, the issue down there at the far end of Trevanion Road, there's no sidewalks.
Right.
So kids are walking along the side of the road with cars speeding past them, and and a lot of cars, and so that's that's something's got, well, we've got to take that into account. But that in terms of trying to limit that speeding, that's a council issue, not a planning commission issue.
But just to get an idea of the count, you're talking
But-
about what went
right.
through the
But-
square.
but-
That's 3,000 going past my house.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's important.
But I don't have a problem.
But but to tie all that back in, well, we don't want any development, but we want you to finish the greenway. Well, the only way we're going to do that is through the development, so you better make up your mind what you want.
Well, let's try to keep back to the agenda here.
Let's go on back.
Yeah, we're a little bit over the 10 minutes.
Yes.
I didn't think we were going to be 10 minutes on this.
Just because you came in late doesn't mean we should stay late.
I will go through, we're kind of at the questions now individually, so I'll go through some of those pretty quickly because in some cases we've already talked about it or there's not really much else to say about them. But about 80% or 81% of people who responded were resident property owners and about 10% were renters. And then it was kind of evenly split through the rest of the options there. For question 2, where people lived, we kind of talked about that already. A lot of zone 2 and zone 3, but as well a significant amount from zone 1, which is that downtown area. For people who were business owners, we had 77 total business owners respond, which is a great number.
Yeah.
And most of those were in downtown. It was about 42% were downtown. And then kind of evenly split throughout the rest of those zones on that map.
So question 3, my first thought was the business owners. What do they bring to Taneytown? Because they have a business, or what do they actually bring to the city?
That's a good question. And
I mean,
that
take-
varies depending on the business.
not
but-
to pick your business, but your particular business, what does that do for Taneytown? Now, if you could open that as a restaurant too, then it would have a purpose for the people and the citizens of Taneytown.
Right.
But most of your customers, I'd say 99% of them are probably out of town.
So take my typical guest is here for a wedding, is here for 1 or 2 days, and is
where's
looking
the
for
wedding?
something.
And where's the wedding?
The wedding is either at Antrim, or it's at Tannery Barn, or it's at Venue Bouchon. So I am supporting those local businesses in what I do. And then those folks, all the time I get that, what's there to do here in downtown?
Right.
Right.
And so, one of the things that I'd brought up in some of the Main Street discussions, between our business and Antrim 1844 and the number of short-term rentals that are in the area, probably upwards of 15,000 people a year come and spend the night here in Taneytown, or in the immediate area. Between, like I said, between Antrim and the few short-term rentals that are around. But beyond that, probably 30,000 people a year come to go to weddings here. And they're here just for the day. They're not necessarily staying, but they could be coming here and maybe spend money. Maybe they, if the wedding's at 4 o'clock, maybe they come at 1 o'clock to go wander around and see some shops and then go to the wedding, or they want to get something to eat before or something to eat after or something, So when you ask what do we bring that to the marketplace, and so we bring customers. That's what we.
Customers for you.
Well, but customers to me could bring customers to businesses downtown.
Because what I see, people walking probably into Vandy Road from Antrim down there, walking uptown to look at what we have downtown.
Right.
Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, everything's closed.
Yes, and that's.
So that's why we need some type of destination or some type of businesses downtown that people want to go.
Wholeheartedly
reason.
agree. I think that
Even a
we.
gift shop because they missed a wedding.
And I think that we've missed the boat for years on that. But for a long time it was just Antrim, and when it was just Antrim, but now you have two other high-end wedding venues that bring a couple of hundred people for an individual party. There's money coming into town and flowing. One of the other things that, just real quick, there's a company called Dirk and Edson up in Lidditz that came and did a little bit of research for the chamber. And when they sent back some demographic research, and they were shocked at the amount of money that leaves this town. It's nearly all of it. Very little money is spent by the local residents in town, according to their research. So, there's an opportunity to fix that and capture some of that anyway, So I think that there are opportunities, but that is a economic development thing, not so much our thing. But we ought to be aware of that as we move forward with the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So when I read question 3, I was happy to see it skewed that way, because they were
Yeah,
the people that I wanted to hear from.
That just drew my attention right away,
Yeah.
and that made me start thinking, why and what?
Right. Well, why is just like Barry said. If if I owned a place, I want to make money off of it.
Right,
I mean,
so, okay.
I'm
All right,
not-
let's move to question 4.
Moving on.
All right, question 4. About how long people have lived in Taneytown. Again, that majority was over 15 years. That's about 49%. And the discrepancy here that you're seeing where it says 45% is actually because we later on removed the number of people who said that they did not live in Taneytown from that total calculation. So the number of responders who live in Taneytown have lived here for over 15 years. That's 49%. And then less than 5 years was 33%. And I kind of looked into that a little bit. The age breakdown of people who have lived here for 5 years or less was majority, about 60% people in the 30 to 54 age range. And then the second highest group was actually the 18 to 29 age range, which is about 19%. And then 55 to 64 and 65 plus were each about 11% of the responses. And for the people who've lived here for over 15 years, again, the majority was that 30 to 54 range, was with about 38% of the responses, and then 55 to 64 and 65 plus were about 30 and 25%, and much less than for the 18 to 29, of course, in that. But I just thought that was interesting that the majority of people were actually in the that kind of adult age bracket rather than the senior age bracket. And I did check for, in general, the 55 and over age brackets, 63% had lived here for 15 years or more. And then the next highest was 1 to 5 years, which I guess could be contributed to Carol Vista. But like someone had mentioned before, when we looked at the very beginning of this, there is a strange gap in that 6 to 10 and 11 to 15, where that was significantly less than any of the other timeframes kind of across the board, which I just found kind of interesting. I'm not really sure what the gap is, but I think it's just an interesting thing. The age range, majority was 50% were adults 30 to 54, and then about 40% were 55 and over.
So this-
When asked,
So
Sorry?
looking at that, then we should be looking at more senior living development,
Well,
less townhouses.
I can see where you might draw that conclusion, but I guess I'm not really surprised at that split. I mean, when I was 19, I wouldn't have filled out a survey. I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't have
Yeah.
done it. I just wouldn't have taken the time. Just saying.
So, but I kind of take that opposite tact. While there is certainly a large, market of, the seniors and older adults, still the age 30 to 54 bracket is still your largest, section of the bell curve there. And
But look at their need compared to the need
Right.
of the 55 and over.
Right,
You
but-
don't have the school issue, you normally don't have the crime issue.
Yeah.
You might have the EMS issue.
Yeah. But generally
point.
speaking, though, and at 30 years old, can you, are you looking at the big house or are you looking for a townhouse? So when we talk about housing and housing types, the lower end of that bracket may not be looking for the big single-family home on a 10,000 square foot lot.
Yeah, but
Don't you need them available for when they do
Yeah.
get ready?
yeah, so,
I don't disagree. With the variety of housing types is absolutely necessary.
It's a stepping stone,
well, so my stepping stone would be a little bit different. I'd rather buy a lot that was big enough that I could expand, and, which is what I did at my house. I built my house, and then when I had more money, then I put on the deck. Then I had more money, I put on the carport in the workshop. So to me, that's the way I would, I decided I was gonna live here. I bought the lot, I built the house, and I added on to that, as opposed to moving into a townhouse and then moving to a bigger house later on. Different ways of skinning that cat.
So this is your big house, or is there another step? Because your kids are already growing, they're
Yeah.
growing. You're getting at the age where you probably don't want to mow the yard.
Yeah, so well, I'm okay with mowing the yard, but I am happy I didn't build a bigger house.
I'm with you there.
Anyway, interesting.
All right,
Done.
where are we on, step 5 or 6? Question 5 or 6?
we are on 6 now.
6,
Yes.
okay.
6. And then this question was asking how many members of the household the responder had, and that's really kind of just representing the total population of Taneytown that would have been represented in the survey. So unsurprisingly, the majority was the 30 to 54 range with about 30%. 65 and over was 24%, and 55 to 64 was about 11%, which is the same as the young adult number, was also about 11. And then in total, children were about 24% and very evenly split, 8% for each of them for those different age brackets of toddler, elementary age, and then middle and high school age.
When I looked at that, my first thing popped to my mind was, when do you know that you're no longer a young senior, you're a senior?
Depends on what shows up in your medicine cabinet.
I must have missed that stage.
No, you need glasses.
Sorry, I mean, there are just things that. All right.
Okay, question 7. People overwhelmingly said good and very good. That was about 73% of responses said that, and about 10% said excellent for the quality of life in Taneytown. And
So
why
even-
people,
I thought that was interesting too, because of all the comments that was mentioned, how, I mean, the percentage that was very good and good, I thought stood out.
Yeah,
I was impressed,
yeah, impressed and pleased.
yes.
And
So
actually,
somewhere along the line, somebody's doing something
Right.
in the right direction.
but I'd be curious to know why people voted fair or poor. That's,
Well, they're the ones that's in the crime rate.
could be. That's an
Could be,
assumption.
and I don't know, Emily, do you have any insight into that from some of the open-end responses? Was there something in there that told us anything?
I looked at the poor responses specifically. I will say that one of them was a response that I think maybe was not someone who was taking the survey seriously and probably could be discounted. But other than that, there wasn't really a consistency in any of the answers among the people who said poor. And I couldn't really get an idea of why they said poor versus somebody who said good and had similar responses. I think it's just maybe differences of outlook at the town or something.
So my question was poor, was that property-owned property or rental, people that was renting? Just curious where the poor.
It was pretty evenly split. I mean, it was kind of like all of the answers were kind of one or two here or there, and it really wasn't enough to make some kind of significant analysis of, unfortunately. But I think it's good that there's so few that we couldn't really have, like a majority, because there's so few people who said poor in general. Question 8, why people chose to live in Taneytown. We already talked about this a little bit. Affordable housing, near family and friends, and then safety and low crime, which again was just kind of mentioned throughout the survey, that people were concerned that it might increase just because, in general, the idea that it could increase would cause them to not want to leave because that's why they moved here, or some people who indicated that they believed there was a rise in crime that they were witnessing. Question 10, the 5 things that people believed were most important to a high quality of life. Recreational opportunities and traffic were tied for the top spot. And then quality of education, police services, and fire and EMS were the most common responses after that. And protection of drinking water was actually really, really close in there as well. So I would kind of consider that in the top 5. So those were all things that people felt were really important.
So those questions in 10, were they related in any way to age group? Those questions?
I didn't look at that specifically. There are so many responses for those that it would take me a little more time, but I can delve into that and kind of see what the split is of how people voted for those things.
Yeah, because I was just looking at recreation and the schools, how they got such a high score.
And again, it could be that the majority of people who responded were in that 30 to 54 age range, and that's just kind of, because there were more of them, there were more votes for those responses.
That's what I was saying, they were the ones maybe between 30 and 54 or something.
I don't know, for the recreational, I mean, I think that would be even 30 and up, really.
Yeah.
I guess it depends. Is recreational just going for a walk, or is it recreational having a Little League football team?
It depends on what age group you're falling in then too. That's why I mentioned what category of ages.
Yeah, yep, tracking.
I mean, Carol Vista, I mean, what's their recreation?
Swimming.
Yeah, they have their they get their recreations in town, in their development there.
Certainly do have a nice clubhouse with lots of things to do
Yep.
there, so. Moving along.
Moving on.
Let's see. Other than a change in employment, what might cause someone to leave Taneytown? We talked about this a little bit already, but crime, overpopulation or overdevelopment and deterioration were the top answers. And there were a lot of open-ended responses to this as well, because there was an open-ended element where people could either add something that wasn't on the list or elaborate on something that was on the list. And in most cases, it was elaborating on those three things: crime, overpopulation, and deterioration of the community. So a lot of it was, like, for example, people said either that there was too much development or density, or that they were afraid of there being too much development, and that they wanted the development to be put into homes and local businesses in downtown rather than outward development or new building. The idea of more people equals more crime. Also the idea that people held that too much low income housing or too many rentals were bringing crime into Taneytown, or would bring crime to Taneytown. And rentals specifically were mentioned a couple of times, with the idea that they were either unkept or that they were in some way a blight, that people weren't necessarily maintaining them the way that they wanted the town to be looking. And then also what we talked about a little bit before, that people saying in general it lacks community, whether that was feeling ostracized in some way or wanting there to be a stronger sense of community in the downtown area on Main Street, or because of thinking that there maybe weren't enough programs available to have that sense of community.
Okay, I just got lost. So that's easy. That happens to me a lot. So on page 1819, what was the actual question?
So that was, other than a change in employment, what might cause you to leave Taneytown?
To leave Taneytown.
Yeah, I noticed that
I-
that title wasn't on the page, and I,
Yes, I realize now that that somehow got cut off, and I apologize for
Yeah,
that.
okay, that was the leave Taneytown, okay. Yes. Thank you.
Now, question 13, right?
Yes, how people felt that land should be managed. Most people said parks, trails, or recreation areas were things that they wanted Taneytown to promote, and there a significant number of people also said to maintain those levels. People also said that they did not want to promote low-income housing. They wanted to limit it specifically. And then it was kind of even split for promoting and maintaining for agricultural uses, child daycare, and then small-scale commercial were all pretty even between promoting and maintaining, but that people did not necessarily want to limit those things. Oh, and multifamily residential was also something that people wanted to limit. Whether that goes kind of hand in hand with.
I think that that gets associated with rentals.
Right, with rentals and maybe perception of low income housing as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, you're right. Low income, multifamily, and rentals kind of all kind of fall in a same, I think people perceive that all pretty well the same.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Based on the responses that we were seeing, it seems, especially, in this community, that's kind of the general idea that people have. Which I think is not, again, like Craig says, probably throughout all the communities is kind of a similar mindset. Question 14, how people viewed some of the housing related statements that we had here. Everybody agreed that we should promote restoration of historic houses. It was mentioned throughout the survey in a variety of ways, and that's kind of that idea of character or downtown revitalization kind of goes hand in hand with that. People also agreed that Taneytown should create or enforce minimal housing standards for rental properties, which is something we've kind of seen over and over in here as well. And people disagreed that they thought that Taneytown should not encourage more diverse housing types, and of course, again, should not encourage more rental housing. Question 15 about how people felt about city services or other services. In general, most of them had a really good adequacy rate, above that kind of 50 or even 60% rate. Especially the library had a 94% adequacy rate, which I think is incredible. There were a couple of things, traffic control was where people felt it was inadequate, which I think is not surprising based on some of the thoughts about the town square that people seem to indicate. And then some of the areas where things were a little bit more evenly split between adequate and inadequate were community centers and events, internet service, and public transportation. That was kind of pretty even, actually.
Yeah, I was surprised at that, Jim.
So was I.
Sorry. Sorry, Emily. So we were basically surprised on question 15 where they talked about the ambulance and they say they had adequate service because,
80-some%.
Yeah.
Which,
because we're.
They've never needed it.
Yeah, maybe. But based on the results, and actually, I think it was in the 2023 county was APFO report.
yeah.
Taneytown was listed as not having adequate facilities.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it was kind of
That's something the
interesting.
county's trying to address, through
But I
the,
guess that's.
Oh, this
that
report right
depends-
here.
Yeah, it depends on if they were on the first call or the second call. Or the third call. So that was impressive to see that too. Sorry, Moot, go ahead.
Right. Question 16.
Yeah, I apologize, man. Yeah, so,
Which one you on?
so I'm sorry, I'm backing up here a little bit. So I just wonder when people talk about they don't want any more rental properties, what they have in mind. So I go back to when we were fortunate enough to get that tour down there in Brunswick. They had that new apartment building that they were putting up. It's going to be managed by people. Now, it didn't happen yet, but it's going to be managed. And I expect that's going to be a very nice apartment, at least at the beginning anyway. And if it's managed well, I don't think anybody would complain about that. It'd be like,
Well, I think Taneytown Crossing is a good example of something
Exactly.
very similar.
Good management.
Yeah, where good management and staying up with things are key to,
No,
that's the,
no,
Harney
I was,
Road.
you're talking,
Harney Road.
you're talking about the income base one in
yeah,
Brunswick.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That was pretty well done.
It was very well done, very well managed. DHCD, and then when they made a tour through here back in the fall, because that was a housing community development project in terms of some of the funding that went into that, they wanted to see what it looked like, and they were very pleased with what they saw. So,
Taneytown Crossing
Yeah.
is,
yeah, I mean,
I've been impressed.
I wasn't sure about it, at the time. I remember that 5-hour meeting that went on here. But,
So I think it's a terminology thing again. So is that low income? And so when people think of low income, they think,
Right.
maybe they think of HUD or, and
right.
it is
Now, that's
rental.
affordable housing and it is rentals.
Right.
But, again, it's properly managed.
So that's income based. You could be a lawyer at a VAPCO making 88,000 a year
Right.
or whatever.
But your rent reflects that.
Income based, yeah. And the place is spotless. I mean, here we are a
And it
few
works.
years
Yeah, and it works.
beautifully, yeah. I mean, I can almost wipe it off the map when it comes to code enforcement. There's nothing.
Anyway,
That's what we needed to do.
Yeah.
Prove those.
Right, and so that kind of development, like what we saw in Brunswick, that I think is something we ought to be looking toward. It's not, but that's going to require some education on our part because, educating the populace because, they see rentals, they see apartments, they, mind words right to the wrong things and not necessarily to the right things.
But we have we have success
Yes.
on Taneytown
We have
Crossing.
success.
Plus, we have Brunswick,
Point to.
Brunswick put that investment there for a reason.
Yep.
They must have seen something somewhere else.
Yep.
It's working.
Yeah.
As long as it's managed correctly.
so Emily, we blew your schedule out of the water, but the
It's a
good
little bit
thing is
more than 10 minutes.
your survey is pretty thought-provoking for us, so that's good.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
What
good.
it meant to be.
all right.
No, and
All right.
the
on
conversation,
to
the
question-
discussion is very, very helpful too. It's really helping
Yeah.
us out with the input. So this is time well spent for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, let's go on to question 16.
All right, 16. The the resources that people felt were important in terms of regulation and protection, groundwater was the number one that people mentioned. A significant number of people did also say wildlife habitat, and then kind of fell off a little bit from there. People thought streams and rivers were also important, as well as prevention of noise pollution. I did notice that other than water quality, no one really mentioned any of these in any of the open-ended questions, whether because it's not really a big concern to them personally, or there were just other issues that they were more concerned about and wanted to voice opinions about. The only thing that really was kind of mentioned was light pollution was mentioned a couple of times, not a majority by any means, but enough that I took note of it. So, while there were other responses here that had a lot more votes, it was interesting that light pollution didn't have as many votes, but it had more mentions throughout the survey other than for groundwater. So.
Well,
I thought that was impressive, that you got, what, 239 responses on groundwater. How that was related to the citizens receiving their water and sewer bill.
Well, of course, I mean, the water here, and there's nothing you can do about the quality of the water here because it's out of the, that's the aquifer that we're in. But, people aren't, it's not the greatest water, but it's fine.
But 239 people responded to that, you
Yeah,
know?
well-
And that's-
right,
and
so
high-
they want good water.
But they said it's important,
It is important,
so,
right?
so that's good, but they didn't
long
have
as
a
it
lot of
doesn't cost them
complaints. That
anymore.
means the town's doing a good job.
Right. If it wouldn't be for the hardness of the water,
Which you
we'd be
can't do
in
anything
great
about.
shape.
Yeah, right, which is something we can't do anything with.
All
So,
right.
but,
Question 17?
17, the availability of recreational programs was a little bit more evenly split. People generally felt like there was not enough for adults or young adults, or also the overall availability. But again, that could be just reflecting that idea that people aren't necessarily aware of all of the programs. People did feel that there was the right amount of programs for elementary and kind of children in general, as well as for families. And nobody really felt like there was too much of any kind of recreation. That wasn't really something that we saw a lot of. And I did note that most people didn't seem to know, for people with disabilities, they didn't seem to know, which could just be a reflection of whether or not they themselves are disabled or have someone around them who is dealing with a disability. So they wouldn't necessarily know about those services. And I think that's kind of reflective of some of the other areas where people didn't know. Someone who's in the 55 and over community might not necessarily know what's available for toddlers or for elementary school students. So I think that those answers maybe are a little bit more vague than I would have hoped for, but I think that potentially could be reflective of just age groups and differences in where you are in your life and what you're seeking. So question 18, where people felt that the city should focus its parks, rec, and conservation efforts. Most people said improving existing parks and playgrounds, as well as building an indoor rec center with a gym. And then also it was pretty evenly split between 4 different categories that people were picking: expanding recreation programs and services, developing trails and greenways, protecting open space and natural resources, and developing walking or biking connections between schools, parks, and neighborhoods. So people felt kind of all those things were important.
I'm surprised that improving the parks,
Him too, with the
Is,
parks we have, yeah.
yeah, because I really think, I think they're nice parks, and I think the town's doing a good job.
I agree. I think that a lot of the responses I saw in relation to parks didn't necessarily say that. I mean, a lot of them said they loved the parks. And I don't know if it's whether people feel that they just want to continue to invest in the parks, even if they think that they're already great, and didn't necessarily want any of the other the options that were in this question, maybe. So
Yeah, it might be just a matter of keeping a good thing going rather than a criticism, really.
Because as we can see in question 19, which is the overall impression of parks, most people said for cleanliness, attractiveness, safety, and location, good or excellent, which is great. And the only area where it was a little bit more evenly split was in facilities available, it kind of was closer between good and fair rather than kind of leaning a little bit more towards good and excellent.
That's all the people that want the pool.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah, yeah, pool, yeah,
I don't know how you say poor for anything, really. I mean,
either, but anyway. All right. 21,
except maybe a location, because there's none out at that end of town. That's the only one that there's none near,
you know, because they're all
Hartman.
schools.
There's none near Hartman Avenue.
They use the street.
I think that the capacity might be what people are talking about because the sports programs are already utilizing all the playing fields to capacity, and that's impacting the play time and practice time for the organized sports programs. So that may be what some of the folks were thinking along those lines.
Yep, that's a
Probably
very good
right.
point. I
Yep.
think that's probably
point,
exactly
too.
right. Yep.
And it was interesting, not very many people mentioned parking in general, but where people did talk about parking, it was specifically in relation to sports programs and sports fields, feeling that there wasn't enough when there were events for sports. Okay, so question 20 isn't in this list just because it was an open-ended question and I did not include all of those answers in here, but that was about traffic where people felt that the most problematic or dangerous area was, and pretty much everybody said 140 and 194. That was overwhelmingly the response. A lot of the other areas that people mentioned were intersections or streets that were just around the square, and I think can probably be contributed to issues at the square as well. A couple people mentioned the traffic circle, but not really a significant amount as well. And people were pretty split. Some people mentioned safety as a factor at this intersection. Some people mentioned comfort and walkability, noise pollution, light pollution, things like that. And a lot of people mentioned congestion as well, of course. Question 21, talking about alternate transportation options. Everybody said safe walking trails and sidewalks, which could really coincide with their thoughts about the square and downtown and walkability and you know, safely walking on these streets. A couple people also did feel that bike lanes and paths or bus service were things that they were interested in having. Question 22 were transportation improvements that they felt were needed. And this again was pedestrian and bike safety or traffic calming and improved maintenance of existing roads and bridges or improved public transportation services. And then the last question was another open-ended question, just kind of if you had any other thoughts about the quality of life in Taneytown or anything else to add it there. And pretty much all of those responses were just reiterating things that were already throughout the survey. And another question, there weren't really a ton of things that were new to that particular question. So it really just kind of supported a lot of the things that we were already seeing. And that is the end of the survey. Any other questions or thoughts or things we wanted to go over in relation to the survey?
No, it's a lot of information. I
Yeah.
want to thank you both for the effort you put into it. And I want to thank Paul for the effort he put into it and getting the surveys out to people and getting responses back. We really, the five of us up here really appreciate everything that you did in that.
Yep. I'm not really surprised at the results we got. I guess it's kind of what I expected, but I mean, and there were a few surprises in there, but overall, I guess that's kind of the things that they complained about is one of the main reasons why I got on the planning and zoning. Well, I'm happy to be here.
All right, let's move on to the next.
Question, Jim?
Paul? No, come to the mic and let's do it now.
Hi, everyone. Paul Cluth, resident. Boy, this is a very good survey. I mean, a lot of good information. Thank everybody for coming out on such a bitter night to do this thing and make this happen. Just a couple quick questions about the survey. On page 9, I wanted to ask what the number of businesses that were not located in any of the zones? Would you have that statistic available by chance?
Let me just double check. I think that,
That's kind of the last boxed item on that page.
That's mainly, I am not a business owner, I think is most of those respondents.
I would assume so, or my business is not in any of these areas of Taneytown. Any idea how many were not, that were outside of the zones?
yeah, let me just
Just
double check.
curious.
Oh, no, because they were, unfortunately, I grouped not a business owner and, or it's not in that area together. So I can't really tell, who had a business that just was not in Taneytown. But some of the zones, like 6, 9, 7, and 8 kind of expanded outside of the actual city. So technically those were outside of Taneytown. And then any other response from a business owner that was maybe outside of those areas is unfortunately not a number that I have.
Page 12, would you have a breakdown of the number of members in a household? Like how many respondents were just one member, 2, 3, 4, 5, or more? Anything like that?
I can get that. I will have to double check. It might take a little bit of finagling the data in the program we use to analyze it and to gather it. But I think that's something that I can get. Yeah.
And if the board feels that that's an important statistic related to that area on page 12, I kind of thought it might be to know how many families, for example, were in the response. Of course, the age group is also important, that was provided, but just like the number of respondents and the number of people in their household.
Yeah, that would be, I think, Emily, so for each of the, I guess for each age group, or for each, I'm not sure how to put that. But yeah, try to figure out how many people were in each household, I guess is the, if the respondent was in the 33 to 54 age group, how many people, what was the average number of people in that household? Maybe that's the best way to look at it.
Well, a household could have a whole mix. You could have grandparents, you could
Right, but
have.
I'm saying,
you know,
if the respondent fell into that age category, how many people were in that person's house? And then, like, get an average out of that.
And another real quick summary type question is, for other surveys that you have done for your firm or have seen across the board, say in Maryland or other areas, is our city off the mark with something that's kind of would be obvious that we've not really recognized or captured? I just want to throw that out there for, consideration. Is there something that would be really good for our master plan that we're not seeing or we haven't thought of? And I just leave that as an open-ended question.
All right.
That's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
You.
All right. The update, is that you, Emily?
Yes, yeah, I'll go over that. And that, I'm not really going to go over this entire packet and the pages of the actual plan. That's something that definitely we can look into if you have any questions or more detailed elements that you want to get into. But essentially, the background data is 99% done. There's a couple areas where we're either waiting on data from another agency or we're waiting on end of the year data from 2024 to be released before we kind of add that in. So the kind of missing spots are mostly those things that we kind of have to wait on. And otherwise, it's really just things like photos and graphics that won't be added until later, or areas where maybe we wanted to remake some maps because maybe they weren't necessarily clear, the ones that we had available to us. But that doesn't really change anything about the background data itself. We have all the data. It's just the visual component of it. So unless there's anything really specific that anyone wanted to look at, I think that probably can be.
Questions?
Well, for me, I don't think for Emily, but I need to talk to some of the old timers, because in the, in the transportation section, I guess I don't know where some of these, like Key Crossing Road, I think that's out this way, and Starboard Drive Extension, I know where Starboard Drive is, what's the extension, you know? So just, I wouldn't mind knowing exactly what each of
Where
those
the-
meant. So I don't know if that's on a map somewhere.
It
that we can
is.
get.
It's on the, um,
One of the maps that's online?
Well, I think, Key
Key
Crossing, and Sells Mill Extension, I think are the same thing.
East Crossing comes off of, Old Taneytown towards 140.
But that's a map that's online, or?
Actually, that map is, in the comprehensive plan,
Man,
I
I think
think.
so too, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yes,
most of
it-
these are.
Oh,
I'll look,
It's on,
look again.
if you look at on the city website, under the comp plan, the comprehensive plan map is there. And that will show you a number of those. Key Crossing Road is one that connects from Stumptown kind of diagonally across the Hoffman property, which is adjacent to the Creekside subdivision. And then connects to 140 and continues on to Old Taneytown. The Shower Road extension is basically realigning the end of Kraus Mill Road to get rid of the acute angle where it
Okay.
adjoins 194. And the Stumptown is really a realignment, getting rid of kind of a sharp S bend.
Yep.
And
We
I think
talked
they're
about
also
that.
having it in the transportation element map that's also on the city website.
Yep. I'll check them out. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Jim.
What's
Sure thing.
commercial access road, just as a question? Commercial access road, do you know what that is, Jim?
That one, I think years ago, when the Dollar General was done, that eliminated that, I guess, essentially updating the plan to get rid of that commercial access road. It was envisioned to link the Thunderhead Bowl
Yeah, so it's
and
supposed to link the backside of the
the
Thunderhead Bowl
bank
parking lot
and
to,
sites
Yeah.
with sort of
Yeah,
a back
Kraus
connection.
Ford. Kraus
between
Ford,
Dollar
yeah.
General and Kraus Ford.
Right,
Little-
and yeah, and property owners, some of the property owners were not in favor of that connection being made when we pursued that, when the Dollar General site plan was under review.
And Emily, these comments were based on documentation that you found and reviewed, and these are your comments, right?
Yes,
Okay.
in the summary part of that I had.
Yeah, in the, the summary, yes. Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, so that's just kind of summaries of where we stand, what's in that section, and maybe where we stand if there's some outstanding items in there.
Okay, yep, thanks.
Ready to move on to our goals and objectives?
I think so. I will turn it over to Craig for that.
Yeah, so the question is for this is a rather lengthy discussion and kind of critical. And do we want to do this tonight, or do we want to kind of pick up fresh for the next meeting?
There's a lot in this.
I'd
Yeah.
recommend we pick it up, but I'd like to throw out some comments so everybody can think about them.
That'd be fine.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
So when I read that, in my opinion, most of it is still good, but the number one thing I need to know is what everybody thinks is a small town atmosphere. That's what I need to know.
Well, and I think that we, in our field trip to Brunswick, I think we saw some of that. One of the things that we had done through, like this summer when I went to the MML conference in Ocean City, there was a trip over to Berlin, and so we got to walk around with their their economic development people and city council and talk about the things that they do and what was happening in their downtown. And it happened to be the day of their farmer's market, and, you know, it looked like something out of a Hallmark movie.
Sure.
And so people talk about that small town feel, that's the kind of thing that I see them looking for.
It was in the 210, that same catchphrase, so that's what I think it is, a catchphrase.
Right. Yeah, so, I
Used
mean,
often.
like, what is it, is a small town Harney? I mean, that's a small town. But you gotta
Really
drive.
small town.
You gotta drive somewhere to get. So do we wanna have a small city? Because really what people want, they wanna live here, but they don't wanna have to drive somewhere to get something. So that's not really a small town, it's almost a
Want the
small city.
services.
So anyway, I'm okay with, I certainly have in my mind what I think a small town is, and I can put it in writing and I can tell you what it is, but I don't know if that's what everybody, I guess after 60 years, I find out not everybody thinks like me, which I can't understand, but that,
Well,
I'll
that's,
be in
that's
jail, wouldn't it?
part of
But
what we'll
anyway-
Took me
do.
a long time to figure that out too.
Bring that back to us next month.
yeah.
Put,
But yeah,
and actually,
Put
so
all
we
in
have
some
it ahead
words?
of time, yeah,
I'll put something in words, sure.
do that, if you would.
Mr.
Jim?
Chairman, I'd like to challenge everybody to do what Dan just agreed to do. Why don't you all put in writing what you think that small town feel is? It'll
Okay.
give some basis for discussion.
Exactly. And that's one of the, part of this process is we should define that and come to a consensus on what that is. And that'll help frame the rest of the plan.
Cool. Yep,
Okay.
I'll take that action for sure.
Anything else for us to think about? I
No,
think that's
sir.
gonna be a
That-
big enough challenge.
That was the main thing.
Yeah, that's a-
and
It's gonna be a challenge.
I think it will be.
Involved in this back in 210, what did it mean to you back then, when this was developed, the vision?
No, I'm trying to put it in words, and I go back since, I'm from Taneytown. Small town is when you can walk down the street, meet somebody and know 'em by name.
Yeah. So that's certainly one definition. I'm not sure we can affect change to that. I mean, we're so big now already compared to when, I mean, where
hard to
my-
do that with 8,000 people.
I mean, where my house is, I used to go hunting there, so.
When I ask somebody where they live, you know, they say Carroll Vista, Meads Crossing, they do not say Taneytown. Everybody has their own development, and that's what they call home.
And we've kind of,
It's nice to have your own area, but we need to bring together as one community.
that's the challenge of development that's spread out on 10,000 square foot lots. You know, not that we should be excluding that kind of development, because I think there's obviously a place for it. But I think we ought to be looking more at our densities, and, you know, in the strong towns model of keeping the densities high towards the center. The density should increase as you get to the center of your town.
My small town was, when you did something wrong, it got home before you did.
Yeah, and that's a fact.
That is a fact.
You only been here 6 years.
Hey, I grew up in northern Baltimore County. You know, my son went out, so took his pickup truck and drove out to Highs when he didn't have his driver's license yet. And 3 people called me up to tell me that my son had been out driving out to Highs without his driver's license yet. So, been there, done that, lived it.
That's what we want.
All right. So our next step, wrapping this up for this evening.
So I think Jim has given us a very good homework assignment.
Turned out, if that's the case, then our next one will be February the 18th. Anyone has any other comments? for adjournment.
So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a lively discussion. Very much enjoyed it.
Oh.
this evening.
Yeah, really good.
Tiffany.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Tiffany.
Tiffany, hey, you've been with us the whole evening?
Yeah.
I have. I've been here, but now you've adjourned. So
Oh, no, do you have something, if you'd like to add to the discussion?
Yeah, I
real
mean,
quick,
we can always take
We
one
can
more.
adjourn.
well, I do want, there were a lot of questions here that were still out there floating in the air. And so as we're working on our comprehensive plan, we're going to have open houses that start at the first week of February. And that includes being at the Taneytown Library on February 19th to discuss our master plan. But part of the driving ideas that we have is that working together. And so if I'd like to invite staff and yourselves, the planning commission, to join us on February 19th. You could get feedback from your own citizens who stop by or citizens in the area if you'd like. And we'd love to have you.
What time?
Sorry about that. It's from 1 to 7, but it's not a hard cutoff at 7. The library's closed by 8, so we just need to, we had to have an end time so we
Okay.
could get out of there by 8.
All right.
So, yeah.
Sounds good.
Good.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thank you, Tiffany.
We'll make sure we add your comments to the agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. We're adjourned.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank
All
you.
right. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Night.